Rich traveler missed his flight. The waitress who talked to him never expected what happened next. The massive departure board at Denver International Airport flickered with the dreaded word that every traveler fears: delayed. Flight 447 to New York, originally scheduled for 7 p.m., now showed an agonizing 11:30 p.m. departure time. James Richardson stood frozen before the board, his perfectly tailored navy suit and expensive Rolex, a stark contrast to his growing frustration. At 45, he had built an empire from nothing, turning a $5,000 garage startup into a multi-million-dollar logistics company. Tonight was supposed to be the culmination of 3 years of negotiations, a $47 million acquisition that would transform his business forever. But now he was trapped in Denver, watching his carefully orchestrated plans crumble with each passing minute. Around him, the gate area erupted in chaos. Frustrated passengers flooded the customer service desk, their voices rising in desperation. Families with crying children huddled together, while business travelers frantically rescheduled meetings on their phones. James pulled out his own device and dialed his assistant. The conversation was brief and devastating. There were no other direct flights to New York that night. The Peterson meeting, the one that could change everything, would have to proceed without him or be postponed indefinitely. 3 years of work hanging in the balance because of a weather system 1,000 miles away. As James ended the call, a strange calm settled over him. For the first time in years, he had nowhere urgent to be, no critical calls to make, no fires to put out. The forced pause felt almost surreal. He wandered through the airport's main terminal, past the predictable chain restaurants and overpriced shops that filled every major airport in America. Wolfgang Puck, P.F. Chang's, Legal Seafoods, all sterile environments designed to extract money from captive travelers. Nothing appealed to him. Then something caught his eye on the directory map. Mabel's Diner, Terminal B, lower level. A diner? In an airport? Curiosity, a feeling he hadn't experienced in business for years, drew him toward the escalators. The lower level felt like stepping back in time. Mabel's Diner was a perfect recreation of a 1950s American diner, complete with red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, and a long counter lined with chrome stools. The warm lighting and retro decor created an oasis of authenticity in the sterile airport environment. Behind the counter stood a young woman who immediately captured James's attention. Emily Carter, 28 years old, moved with practiced efficiency as she wiped down coffee cups. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore a simple blue uniform with Emily embroidered on the pocket. Despite the modest setting, there was something remarkable about her, an intelligence that sparkled in her green eyes and a genuine warmth that seemed to radiate from her smile. When Emily looked up and saw James entering, she didn't see an expensive suit or a potential big tipper. She saw a man who looked completely lost, and her instinct was to help. Their first exchange was simple. He ordered coffee. She served it with a smile that felt genuine rather than professionally required. But as they began to talk, something unexpected happened. James found himself actually listening, not just waiting for his turn to speak. Emily asked questions that went beyond small talk, showing a genuine interest in understanding rather than simply being polite. James told her about his delayed flight and the crucial meeting he was missing. Most people would have offered sympathy and moved on, but Emily asked follow-up questions. She wanted to understand why this particular meeting mattered so much, what was at stake, and how he felt about it all. As they talked, James learned Emily's story. She had graduated 3 years earlier with a degree in business administration, focusing on hospitality management. But instead of launching her career, she had stayed at the diner to help support her mother through a devastating cancer diagnosis. The medical bills had been overwhelming, and Emily had sacrificed her own dreams to ensure her mother received the best possible care. What struck James most was Emily's complete lack of self-pity. She spoke about her choices with quiet dignity, explaining how her boss Mabel had become like a grandmother to her, offering flexibility and even salary advances when times were tough. Emily had stayed at the diner not because she lacked ambition, but because she understood loyalty and sacrifice in ways that James had almost forgotten. As the evening progressed, Emily began closing the diner for the night. James realized he had been talking to her for over an hour, the longest genuine conversation he had experienced in months. When she mentioned getting off work, he made an impulsive suggestion. Instead of drinking alone at an overpriced airport bar, would she like to join him somewhere more authentic? 20 minutes later, they sat in Murphy's Pub, a genuine Irish establishment in downtown Denver. Emily had changed out of her uniform into jeans and a simple sweater, and James had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves. The transformation was symbolic, both of them shedding their professional personas and simply being themselves. Over pints of Guinness, James found himself sharing stories he hadn't told in years. He talked about the early days of his company, when every day brought new challenges and small victories felt monumental. He described sleeping in his car outside a potential client's building, not from desperation, but from determination. Emily listened with genuine fascination, asking questions that revealed her sharp business mind. But it was Emily's next question that stopped James cold. What happened to that guy? The one who slept in parking lots? The question forced James to confront a truth he had been avoiding. Somewhere along the path to success, he had lost the passion and creativity that had driven him in the beginning. His days were now filled with boardroom meetings and financial projections, but he couldn't remember the last time he had felt genuinely excited about his work. When Emily mentioned her own dream, opening a restaurant that would serve comfort food made with love, a place where families could afford to eat and feel welcomed, James saw the same spark in her eyes that he once had. She had detailed plans, creative ideas, and the business knowledge to make it work. The only thing missing was capital, locked away by medical debt and student loans. As they prepared to leave the pub, James asked Emily a question that would change both their lives. If money were no object, if you had no limitations, what would you do? Her answer came without hesitation. She would create a restaurant that meant something, not just another dining establishment, but a place where food was prepared with care and customers were treated like family. She had even chosen a name, Emily's Kitchen. Standing outside the pub, James felt something shift inside him. For the first time in years, he saw an opportunity to make a real difference, not just in profit margins but in someone's life. An idea began forming, crazy, impulsive, but more exciting than any business deal he had pursued in recent memory. As they said goodbye and James headed back to the airport for his delayed flight, he found himself thinking not about the $47 million deal he was flying toward, but about the young woman who had reminded him why he had fallen in love with business in the first place. The flight was now boarding, but James hesitated at the gate. For 3 years, he had worked toward this moment. Everything he had built pointed toward this acquisition. But for the first time, he questioned whether the path he was on was the one he actually wanted to travel. James Richardson stood at gate B27, boarding pass in hand, watching other passengers file onto flight 447 to New York. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from his business partner David, reminding him of the morning meeting that would seal their biggest deal ever. The Peterson acquisition represented everything James had worked toward: financial security, industry dominance, and the respect that came with major success. But as he watched the gate agent scan boarding passes, James found his thoughts returning to Emily Carter and their conversation at Murphy's Pub. Something about her passion and clarity had awakened, feelings he thought he had lost forever. When the gate agent called his name as the final passenger, James made a decision that surprised even himself. He walked away from the gate, leaving behind not just a flight, but everything he thought he wanted. Back in his rental car, James called Emily despite the late hour. Her sleepy voice quickly became alert when he explained what he had done. He hadn't boarded the flight. Instead, he wanted to discuss something that had been forming in his mind since they had talked about her restaurant dream. Emily was initially confused, then concerned. They had known each other for less than 6 hours. What could possibly have motivated such a dramatic decision? James explained his proposal with the clarity that had made him successful in business, but with an emotional honesty that was entirely new. He wanted to invest $500,000 in Emily's restaurant, not as a loan, but as a genuine partnership. She would maintain complete creative and operational control, while he would serve as a silent partner, offering guidance only when requested. Emily's response was exactly what James expected: shock, disbelief, and concern for his mental state. She pointed out the obvious: they barely knew each other. How could he possibly risk such a significant amount based on one evening's conversation? But James had thought about this carefully. The $47 million deal he was abandoning would have made him wealthier, but it also would have locked him into a path that felt increasingly hollow. Emily's dream represented something he had lost: the excitement of building something meaningful from the ground up. Over the next 2 weeks, James proved his commitment wasn't just an impulsive gesture. He returned to Denver multiple times, working with Emily to develop a comprehensive business plan. They explored potential locations, analyzed market conditions, and refined the restaurant concept. James discovered that Emily's business knowledge was even more impressive than he had initially realized. Her ideas were creative, but grounded in solid financial planning. Meanwhile, James's business partner David was furious about the missed Peterson meeting. The deal eventually went through with other investors, but David couldn't understand how James could walk away from such a massive opportunity. Their friendship strained as James struggled to explain that success wasn't just about accumulating wealth. Emily gave notice at Mabel's diner with mixed emotions. Mabel, the older woman who had been like a grandmother to her, wasn't surprised by the decision. She had watched Emily for 3 years, recognizing that her talents were being wasted. Wiping down coffee cups, Mabel's blessing meant everything to Emily as she prepared to take the biggest risk of her life. Finding the perfect location took several weeks of searching. When they discovered a vacant storefront in downtown Denver with large windows and existing kitchen equipment from a previous bakery, both James and Emily knew immediately it was right. The space had character and potential, situated in a neighborhood that was growing, but still affordable for families. The next few months passed in a blur of construction, permit applications, staff hiring, and menu development. James found himself more energized than he had been in years, not because he was making money, but because he was helping create something beautiful and meaningful. Emily threw herself into every detail of the restaurant. She researched local suppliers to ensure fresh ingredients, designed a menu that balanced comfort food with creative touches, and interviewed potential staff members with the care of someone building a family rather than just hiring employees. 6 months after their first meeting, Emily's Kitchen opened its doors to the public. The restaurant was everything Emily had envisioned: warm, welcoming, and filled with the sounds of families enjoying meals together. Local artwork decorated the walls, and the menu featured dishes that told stories, including James's grandmother's pot roast recipe that Emily had convinced him to share. On opening night, James sat at a corner table with Emily's mother, Margaret, who had recovered from her cancer treatment and could finally see her daughter's dream realized. The pride in Margaret's eyes reflected James's own feelings as he watched Emily move confidently through the dining room, greeting customers and ensuring everyone felt welcomed. The success of Emily's Kitchen exceeded everyone's expectations. Within weeks, they had a waiting list for weekend reservations. Food critics praised not just the quality of the meals, but the authentic atmosphere that made every guest feel like they were dining in a friend's home. But the restaurant's success was just the beginning of James's transformation. Inspired by what he had accomplished with Emily, he began developing plans for a foundation he called Second Chances. The concept was simple: identify people with great ideas and bigger hearts who just needed someone to believe in them. Emily became James's first success story, but she wouldn't be his last. The foundation would go on to support everything from a veteran starting a construction company to a teacher developing an innovative education program. Each investment was personal, based on human connection rather than just financial projections. 6 months after opening, James and Emily sat in the empty restaurant late one evening, sharing chocolate cake and coffee while reviewing the day's receipts. The numbers were impressive, but more important was the guest book filled with comments from families who had celebrated birthdays, anniversaries, and simple Tuesday night dinners in their restaurant. Emily pulled out her phone and showed James a photo she had taken earlier. A young family with 2 small children, all of them laughing over a shared dessert. It was exactly the scene she had envisioned when she first described her dream to James. As they talked about future plans and challenges, James reflected on how dramatically his life had changed. He was wealthier in the ways that truly mattered, rich in purpose, fulfillment, and genuine human connections. The $47 million deal he had walked away from felt like ancient history. Emily asked about his regrets, and James answered with complete honesty. His only regret was that it had taken him 45 years to understand the difference between being successful and being fulfilled. Success was about what you achieved for yourself. Fulfillment was about who you helped along the way. As they prepared to close the restaurant for the night, James looked around at what they had created together. Emily's Kitchen was more than just a successful business. It was proof that when people with good hearts support each other's dreams, extraordinary things can happen. The story that began with a missed flight and a chance conversation had become something neither James nor Emily could have imagined. They had each found exactly what they didn't know they were looking for. Emily had found someone who believed in her vision, and James had found a way to remember who he truly was beneath all his success. Walking to their cars in the quiet Denver street, both James and Emily understood that sometimes the worst moments, missed flights, delayed plans, unexpected detours, lead to the most extraordinary surprises. Their story was proof that when you're brave enough to change course, the new path might lead somewhere more beautiful than you ever imagined. The end.
Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.